Well, we're almost to the conference finals after what has been a fun but perhaps a little bit grueling playoffs. Find out who's about to make the cut on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, obviously, we have a couple of different topics. We are almost to the conference finals for, the playoffs, and certainly the Jets ain't there. But some interesting matchups that we're potentially looking at, maybe some unusual ones. I don't know if anyone would have predicted what we're looking at, at the start of the season, but, that's part of the wonderfulness of the playoffs and the regular season run. It can lead to some exciting outcomes. And thankfully, for once, we have some fresh blood in both conferences looking to make the grade, although one of them probably not super thrilled with. But, of course, let's start off with the Eastern Conference because that one's actually finished. The Western Conference, let's be real, it's almost done. Edmonton is currently up 3-0 over Vancouver, so you probably know how that's going for a Game 7. But in the East, we have got the Florida Panthers versus the New York Rangers. Obviously, this matchup, I think, should be one of the best in the playoffs. I think we have a really interesting matchup of teams that have two very different approaches to offense, right? The Rangers are a very finishing-heavy, power play-heavy sort of experience, and the Panthers are just really well-balanced on all fronts, right? If you look at their finishing, whether it's at even strength or on the power play, pretty dang good. They don't really have many weaknesses. They're an extremely well-balanced team, and that's why I still think that they're favored in this series. All that said, Igor Shesterkin has been very good during this postseason. So assuming that his form keeps up, it could be a 7-game series. In fact, it would not shock me if that happens at all. Not that I'm predicting this necessarily, but I could see it being the case. But I could also see the Panthers' advantage kind of coming through early. Now, Florida hasn't been perfect during this postseason, and maybe you could say that at times they had some moments where they sort of let it slip against the Bruins. I think they got a little closer than they would like to getting into a 7th game, and the Bruins are not a bad team necessarily, but looking at the playoff field and given how good the Panthers are, you would have expected them to take care of it a little bit sooner, but it got a little bit hairy. It was a 2-1 win in Game 6 that saw the Panthers finally finish that one off and get some rest, but obviously their series will start on the 22nd, which I believe is, Wednesday of this week, so should be an interesting first game. Like I said, I think the Panthers are definitely favored here, but it should be a tight series. I think you've got two teams that have some really great goaltending. They also have some elite finishing talent. It's just which one is going to have the special teams advantage. And that's where, they kind of match up pretty evenly. You've both got two really good power plays. The PK, I don't really know enough about to really speak on, but I certainly know the power play has been great for both teams. So something to keep an eye on. But really, if the majority of the series is played at 5v5, well, then that might just give the Panthers enough of an edge. But again, I'm expecting a close series. Would not be shocked if it is 7 games. We will know here pretty soon as that series kicks off. Again, like I said, starting Wednesday. Now, the other series that might be about to take shape is Dallas versus Edmonton. And this series, I think, is one of the best matchups that we've had in this postseason. I'd put it up there with Colorado and Dallas. I think this one could be really explosive because you've got some really high-end elite talent going up against a really well-balanced offense, right? You've got the Oilers who are just loaded loaded for bear at the very top of their roster with some all right depth. And then you've got the Stars who have matchup problems on almost every line, supplemented by really talented rookies who have started to take over the game. And I think that's where the Canucks or the Stars might have a very unique advantage, right? Dallas just has matchup nightmares at all levels. But of course, they have dealt with some injury issues. Rope Hintz has an injured wrist recently. I think he's still okay to come back. So assuming that he is better and out at full strength, relatively speaking, that would be a huge boost to get back into the lineup. But otherwise, right, the Stars are just deep. Duchesne, Seguin, Ben, really reliable veterans. Then you've got Stankoven and Johnston, Dodonov, all of these different age groups and contributors who, again, like I've said in past episodes, I compared this team favorably to the 2017-2018 Jets. I think that is a very similar model and approach that they're using. I think it could make them a very fun team to watch. Unfortunately, the Stars probably would have greased through the Jets this year, but it would have just been more evidence that the Jets have some work to do and could get themselves back into that state and level of play with some time and effort. But, in terms of what should be a fun series, that one, I think, is probably more of a coin flip. Now, I think on paper, the Stars have a pretty decisive advantage at even strength. But the thing with the Oilers is they're just really explosive, and at any moment, they can turn a game on you very quickly. The big thing, I think, for them is whether their defense implodes. Obviously, Skinner has been okay in net. You've also got Pickard, who I guess could probably do the same job, maybe not quite at the same level, because I think Skinner, when he's on point, has generally been decent. But, obviously doesn't have a great playoff track record, so something to keep in mind. But for the Stars, I think the main thing is slowing down the top six and trying to manage the infractions. Because if you give Edmonton any sort of power play, Draisaitl, Hyman, Nugent Hopkins, McDavid, there's just so many different weapons for them to choose from. And again, like I said, the only real weakness with that team, aside from some middling depth, it's really on that back end. Ceci and Nurse are probably not guys that you want to build a foundation of your blue line on, but that's where a lot of their money is currently being spent. The rest of their defense is okay. I mean, again, this is a team that's really top heavy, and that's going to lean heavily on their forwards to carry the day. And I know I'm talking some smack about Ceci, even though he has scored in this game. So maybe I'm silly for that. But Bouchard has really come into his own this playoffs, and I think he will continue to be a stud defender, really top-end attacking-minded blue liner. He has been a revelation for the Oilers. Obviously, it took some patience to get there, but I think, with what we're going to see with Dallas, he's going to have to really carry the offensive burden on Edmonton's back end because the Stars' defense and offense are really complete. That is a team that is super deep. The only thing for the Stars is they have to wonder about Jake Ottinger. Is he going to be as good as he was in some of the previous series? Are we going to see some of those more uncertain moments with him? That, I think, is to be determined. But in terms of a really fun matchup, I think this one is the better of the two. I will definitely be watching. I think it should make for really exciting hockey. I'm glad I'm a neutral because if I had a rooting interest, it would be pretty tough. But I think for me, I'm going to call the Stars in 7 in this one. I do think it'll take 7 games. I would be shocked if it goes less than 6. But hey, crazy things happen. This is the playoffs. Teams can have sudden star turns from random players. Maybe there is one more surprise in store for us before the Cup Finals. But I think it's pretty safe to say 7 games. Let me know your series predictions for both Stars and Oilers and for Rangers, Panthers below. But of course, you also want to hear about the Jets coaching search. And while there's not a lot of brand new news, we are getting a sense of what Winnipeg is waiting for before they make their announcement. We'll talk about that in just a little bit and talk about some of the other coaching assignments that have been filled elsewhere, perhaps a bit of a benefit for the Jets. But before we get too much further, I did want to let you know about our friends and partners at Policygenius. When it comes to, life decisions, I haven't always made the best ones. I've gotten hurt, in a couple of concert mosh pits, but sometimes you also find yourself dealing with even more dire situations. Sometimes it can even cost you your life. And look, let's be real, right? Nothing is ever guaranteed, and you need to have at least some sort of protection for both you and your family in case of anything life-altering. Policygenius is here to help because they are the nation's leading online insurance marketplace. They save you time and money so you can provide your family with a financial safety net starting today. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options even offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Obviously, for those of you who don't really deal with a lot of legal jargon, we all know that insurance policies are super dense and hard to read. Policygenius has a team of experts who are willing to walk you through each step and explain stuff so that it's easy to understand, and they also help you compare to find the best rates that meet your exact needs for your policy wishes, right? Obviously, this is not an easy process, but Policygenius is here to help you through the whole thing. So check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonnhl or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quote and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonnhl. Hey friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us on today's episode as we're just chatting about the Jets. Obviously, we talked about a little bit of playoff hockey. Apologies for you Canucks fans. It is looking pretty grim, although Connor Garland did just score with a few minutes left. Maybe there is a sign of life, probably a little bit late, but you never know. Like I said, it's the playoffs. Stuff can change in a moment's notice, but I think we're pretty confident that this is going to be Edmonton-Dallas in the next round. But you know what? Sometimes you just want to talk about the Jets instead, and Winnipeg has its own battles to fight, stuff that they're going to want to get straightened out before their playoff run. The biggest one being who the heck is going to be coaching the Jets next season. And that has been a tougher question to answer because there's plenty of candidates, but that pool is slowly diminishing, perhaps for the better in some cases if you're a Jets fan hoping not to have a boring retread. Before we dive into who is off the board and who might make sense for the Jets still, just wanted to let you know that Fox Sports or ESPN watchers, if you find yourself having to turn down the volume because of all the shouting, I highly recommend making the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you daily to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, like I said, we've had a couple of coaching appointments recently, the biggest one being Craig Berube to the Toronto Maple Leafs. And if you're a Leafs fan, all I can say is good luck. I don't know that Berube is the worst coaching decision. I tend to think he's probably more middle of the road. But given how his Blues teams towards the end fared, I also wouldn't really be banking on him to turn the Leafs around, right? I think his style of hockey tends to be very low event, a little more boring and conservative. And if you're the Leafs, right, you're used to really high-octane offense, fast counters, rapid attacks. And that's where I just sort of, I don't know. I don't get the sense that he's the best fit. If you're the Leafs, getting grittier and slower and more defensively sound, that's not really what your identity is. It's not what you need, and it's kind of why I wanted the Jets to stay away from that style of hockey. I didn't really think that it made sense. I didn't think it's what Winnipeg needed. Bones did a really good job with what he had in the past couple of seasons, but I think it was time for the Jets to move on. And Berube would, for me, kind of be a more lateral move, or perhaps in some ways even a downgrade. His teams got outchanced. They did not defend all that well, despite being very big shot blocking teams. And while they were physical on the forecheck, it didn't really lead to them outpacing their opponents offensively. So in terms of a coaching staff fit, I think for me, it just wasn't going to be Berube. And he was also going to be really expensive. I think he's one of the most expensive free agent signings that was going to be available this offseason. So if you're the Jets, you did probably all right, just not even getting to a deeper interview stage. They basically did like a Zoom interview, and that was kind of it. So I think I can, live with that being the case. Now, the Jets have probably had a few other interviews. Evison, I know, was one of them. I think they apparently spoke to Todd McClellan, or at least that's the rumor. No one's entirely sure exactly who they've spoken to. There's just been some speculation and rumors and sources. But we've seen, again, rumors about Scott Arniel being the next head coach and that it's trending that way, which I mean, anyone could probably say that because, let's be real, it's the safest option. It makes the most sense if you're the Jets and you're trying to save money. He's familiar, all that fun stuff. But if you're Winnipeg, right, the fact that they are still waiting and holding out in this process, to me, makes me think that they might be waiting for Todd Nelson. Nelson right now is up 2-0 in his series with the Hershey Bears. They've got a chance to finish off, I think, the Atlantic Division playoffs here in just a little bit. And then they are on to the Calder Cup Finals, which if you're, rooting for, or not, sorry, I think it would be not the conference finals, obviously the conference finals. So I think that for us is probably exciting. Obviously, Todd Nelson has had a big track record of success at the AHL level. He's already a championship winner. If he gets through this next division and then starts pushing towards the Calder Cup, that will be very exciting. I think that's really what the Jets are hoping for is, a good coach who will interview well, who's going to play the kids and be offensively ambitious and progressive. And Nelson might very much fit that bill. Now, there is a risk with him. Like I said, his last NHL stint wasn't great. But you know what? Considering the options, I think I would rather take a risk next year and see what he can do with our youth and more, I wouldn't say AHL-oriented lineup, but certainly a team that's going to have some AHLers coming up and starting to filter in. A coach who has that familiarity and who can start to bring some, modern game systems and stuff that he's been working with Hershey's system and really finding a lot of success with, I wouldn't mind giving a shot here. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But at least you gave another unique candidate an opportunity to cut his teeth, and maybe it just benefits both parties. Now, in terms of one other candidate that was sort of out there, Rod Brindamore, I know that there was some speculation about. You've already seen by now he's been extended for 5 years. That is unfortunate for the Jets, but also not super surprising, I guess. I think Carolina was probably loath to let him go, and, he's pretty comfortable where he is. I will say I would be surprised if he finishes out that 5 years, but he's also one of the best coaches out there. So it's entirely possible he does, but I do think that in the next couple of seasons, if Carolina doesn't figure out a way to get past, the second round or whatever, it might be time to part ways. And I don't think it's just on Rod's shoulders here. I think the support staff has not really been all that great. But by the same token, he's going to have to wear some of that responsibility. And, it is what it is, right? So, for the Jets, I mean, it is what it is. Obviously, I think, the pool of candidates for Winnipeg is narrowing, and it keeps making me think that Scott Arniel might be the guy. But, if you're hoping for Todd Nelson, keep holding that hope out. There's still a chance it happens. I would like that to be the option first. Arniel's probably a little further down the list. Sheldon Keefe does seem like he will probably go to the Devils. That's my guess. But he did interview with the Jets, apparently, from what I understand. So maybe there's still a chance that he also comes to Winnipeg. If he does, he'd be a pretty good coach for this team. Perhaps not my first choice, but still a relatively good coach in the upper crust of choices you could make. So, in terms of an offensively minded coach who would probably get some good stuff out of Winnipeg's youth, I'm willing to entertain the idea, even though it didn't work out with Toronto. But for the Jets, obviously, a lot of stuff to cover through the offseason. One fun little thing that I just wanted to spotlight in a little bit is to give the captain for Winnipeg his roses. He has actually gotten a number of Selke votes and actually got a number of first place votes from what I recall. So, hey, Adam Lowry, is he really deserving of those Selke votes? First off, spoiler, answer is yes, absolutely. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about his interesting career trajectory because he hasn't really had a normal aging curve as we've seen with a lot of players of his ilk. In fact, I would almost say that he's kind of a bit of a unicorn with how he's had like a really good couple of years, then some really down years, and then he's back up to playing some of the best hockey of his career. We'll talk about the captain and what he's been for this team in just a little bit. Before we go any further, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What helps win championships is also what keeps your vehicle alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Whether you're looking for superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, if you're looking for speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has everything you need to make your vehicle top of the line. With over 122 million parts for your number one car, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for, and with eBay's guaranteed fit, Your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. With eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home big wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are just wrapping up really quickly with some thoughts for Winnipeg's Selke vote earning center. Obviously, Adam Lowry. He had a monster year this year. And I know that in terms of his finishing rate, okay, we all know that Lowry doesn't always score the most elegant goals. In fact, he actually creates so many chances that he doesn't capitalize on. Not necessarily his fault. We just know that his finishing is a little bit below average for what you would expect for a guy who creates as much as he does down low, but that's okay. The biggest thing with him is that he drives play. He's been a two-way monster for Winnipeg. And I think this year, more than some of the previous years, he was an absolute force under bones to be reckoned with. The past year or two has really seen him turn his career around after a couple of seasons late with Maurice that looked like they were starting to tail off. It was getting to a point where I was like, I'm starting to wonder about his, long-term career with the Jets. Is he really starting to hit that age-related decline soon? Because he plays a very physical style. He's a very aggressive player, and that can be pretty grueling on the body. But since then, he has really silenced the critics. He has become an indispensable part of the team. And honestly, if he just finished on his opportunities a few more times, he would look more like Winnipeg's second-line center. In fact, he already plays the time on ice distribution that you would expect for a 2C. It's just that he doesn't actually have that primary scoring role. He's like the Jets matchup guy. And in some ways, that's actually gotten Winnipeg in a little bit of trouble because they kept trying to put him against McDavid and some of the other guys in key games. And he definitely does. He definitely does hold Winnipeg up at times in those matchups. But let's be real, right? I think Winnipeg probably asked a little too much of him. Ideally on a cup contending team, he'd be like your elite 3C. But for the Jets, he's basically done whatever they've asked him to do. And, in terms of his Selke votes and stuff, I think that is a very fair reward. He's been a monster this year. I love him. His personality is great. I think his ability to step up and be a leader for this team has been awesome. And if anyone really deserved, some sort of an award, I don't know what I would even award him other than the Selke. But if there was an award out there that would actually fit his role, I would certainly be interested in that. Not like a Hart candidate or anything, but a guy who, if you spelled Hart with an E as well, you could argue that he brings the heart to the team, the Hart Trophy, I guess. But Lowry had a great season. I felt like he was very underrated, sort of in the vein of Morgan Barron. I think Barron was also really good this year, although his last month or two was a little bit shaky. But otherwise, right, a 10-plus goal scorer playing 9 minutes a night, you just don't find those. And Morgan is a very fun player when he's active and really forechecking aggressively. Kind of does some of the stuff that David Gustafsson I had hoped would start to do as well. So if you have those two running point on your bottom six, you're probably having fun. Great season from Lowry. I hope that it continues for many more years. He's been an absolute blessing to watch in Jets colors. Very tough player. Always stands up for what he believes is right. He seems very community-oriented, and, for the fans, he's just been like this. So very happy that he has gotten some recognition. I wish that, maybe he has a bigger scoring season next year. He's always in the right areas. It's just never quite gone into the back of the net as much as it should. But otherwise, I really couldn't ask for much more. He's been a great captain. I liked the choice from day one. I thought that he made a lot of sense. He wasn't going to be your Josh Morrissey where you'd add even more responsibility and pressure to your number 1D, but he was a guy who everyone respected and everyone would really rally behind. And I think we've seen why this year. It's been a great season from him. For the next couple of seasons that we have him, I hope that he keeps putting up monster results because he has certainly punched above his weight and continues to be Really one of the unsung heroes of this Jets team, especially alongside Niederreiter and Appleton. And if they start to find him some even higher level skill for that third line role, you might really start to see some fun stuff with him and his ability to dominate the offensive zone. But I'd love to hear what you think or what you think about his first season as Jets captain. Drop your thoughts and comments below or at my social medias at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. For tonight's show, though, that is going to be all the time that we have. Obviously, we have some prospect talk probably to go through over the next few weeks. I need to do a little more research on this year's draft class because I really don't follow prospects as much as I used to. It's a coin flip a lot of times, right? So when you get surprised by some of Winnipeg's picks, I am often just as surprised as you are. I am hoping to start changing that because I need to get more read on Jets prospects anyways and get up to date with what they're up to these days. There's a few guys that I am certainly interested in following up with, especially Jakob Julian. I think he is one of the most intriguing Jets prospects that continues to really fly under the radar. I know McGroarty and like Salomonson and Lambert and, of course, Barlow. Those guys, they certainly steal the limelight. But then we have a couple of prospects like Julian who have really started to blossom in their respective leagues, and it'll be interesting to see how that translates at a pro level because it probably won't be long before Julian starts to take on a role with the Moose. So stuff to get excited about, lots of offseason coverage ahead, but like I said, for tonight's show at least, that is going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We will see you back here tomorrow for even more Jets coverage, so be sure to like, follow, and subscribe. And as always, have a great night and go Jets go.